February 6th, Jonathan Alder Board of Education work session to order, and let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mrs. Detweiler.
Here.
Mr. Hooley.
Here.
Mr. McCartney.
Present.
Mr. Rotoff.
Here.
Mrs. Walker.
Here. Okay. Let's take a moment for silent prayer and meditation. Okay, can I get a motion to? Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Vice President, for helping me through, as always. Now, may I have a motion to approve the Board of Education work session agenda for February 6, 2024?
So moved. Second.
Mr. Engel?
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Rotoff.
Yes.
Mr. McCartney.
Yes.
Mr. Hooley.
Yes.
Mrs. Detweiler.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Now, you want to start with the topics?
Sure. I want to thank Nicole Donbosky for being with us this afternoon. I've heard this a couple times, and she always does a great job of tailoring it for the different districts, but hitting on all the most important points. So that's what I've asked her to do. Maybe about 30 minutes, the next 30 minutes, and then some time for questions and conversation. We're going to hit that, and then we're going to go through just a couple other school business general discussions to finish up before we go into executive session. So, Nicole, thanks for being here with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I have probably given this presentation too many times to count at this point, but it's an important issue because the point is to make sure you don't get into the situation that a school district in Southwest Ohio got themselves into. So just for those who haven't heard it before, the reason that I talk about this, in that situation in Southwest Ohio, a superintendent and 4 board members were criminally charged for their activities related to levy and bond campaigns. And this is a project that the Auditor of State has been working on for the past 2.5 years, an important issue. The law revolving around it is 10 years old. But it was the first time there were criminal charges. There were findings for recovery before, but this caused a lot of concern. And at this point in time, we all have critics in the community. Regardless of what the issue might be, you will have people who agree with you or people who don't agree with you in terms of the decisions that you make. And we, want to make sure we're complying with the law as we approach these particular issues. So, after about 2.5 years of working on guidance, the Auditor of State released its final guidance in August. So one of the things that was asked of them is how do school districts and other political subdivisions avoid being put in this situation moving forward? So we have their guidance. It has historically been thought that the superintendent and treasurer and boards lead the way when it comes to levy and bond issues. Technically speaking, what you do as a board is you put the issue on the ballot. That's what you do in your role as board member. The superintendent and treasurer and staff, what they look at are the finances, the facilities, the operations of the district, but they are not advocates in their daytime role. So moving forward, a school district, a board that puts a levy on the ballot, if there is advocacy, it has to be outside of the role as board members, outside of the role as a staff member, And really, the levy committees become critically important in determining whether a levy or bond issue passes. So we have several laws that apply. I won't get into the boring detail unless Sonia wants me to get into that. You can go look up the laws later. But 9.03 is really what I'm talking about mostly. But there is a school-specific statute that really mirrors what the law is that applies to all political subdivisions. And the important piece is there is a potential criminal penalty for violations. So political subdivision, we know fire departments, libraries, non-charter municipalities. So all of you are subject to the same law. So here's what the law allows. The law allows you to communicate with your communities in newsletters, on social media, and other forms about your plans, about your policies, certainly about your board actions, all of your operations. You can communicate with them. But what you are prohibited from doing is using public funds to support or oppose the passage of a levy or bond issue. There's other stuff in here too in that statute, but this is the most important part for today. So basically advocacy, whether it's supporting or opposing. But then we go back to what we can do. This law does not prohibit any of you at any time, including your staff, from attending a public meeting to present information that is not designed to influence. And that's a little bit vague. What does it mean to influence someone? And no person shall knowingly conduct a direct or indirect transaction of public funds to benefit a political action committee. We're going to talk about what that means in a little bit, but this is really one of the tricky situations and probably one of the situations in the Southwest Ohio School District case that became problematic. But that doesn't mean you can't use your own time. We're going to spend a little bit of time. What does that mean? It's easier for you as board members. You're technically only a board member at a board meeting. Probably not how you're perceived, but technically speaking, that's the case. But for superintendents and treasurers and principals, it's a little harder. When do you flip that switch on and off? When are you the superintendent? When are you the principal? So that's a little trickier. And then there's our violation, our criminal penalty. So I'm going to breeze through some of these, but these are our hot topics. We have 4 of them. Hot topic number 1 is what we deal with the most. How are we allowed to communicate? May we mention levy or bond issues in the school's newsletters, social media, and in-person meetings? Yes, but you need to make sure when you're wearing that hat as a school board member or a staff member that it be factual. And the safest way to do that is make sure it's verifiable. So if I'm talking about the district finances, for example, I'm going to rely on the 5-year forecast and other information that the treasurer's office is required to provide, or a consultant that you might provide. We see municipal advisors and folks like that who are involved, who provide information that you can then share factually. The same with facilities. You may do a facilities assessment or an enrollment study. Those reports, that information can help you communicate what the district needs. So we always think these are to-dos and don'ts, right? Always using that neutral information. The auditor's office has advised their best practice is for the board to create a statement of facts. What's the factual information that is driving you to put a levy or bond issue on the ballot? But at the end of the day, as long as it's factual, you can share it. Making sure your staff communicates that the law applies to them too, whether it's a teacher or a custodian or a secretary. They are also limited in their work time.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So would a fact-based question be the district, the school board has set a vision, and that vision is that we're out of space. We need additional classrooms for X, Y, Z grades. We need to build a building, and this building is going to cost $35 million. That's a fact-based statement, right? Because we've gotten estimates, we have an enrollment study to back that up.
Mhm.
So you could say that, you just
Right.
can't say, please
Vote yes.
please vote yes.
Correct.
That, right?
Right, that's
Is that
on the,
right?
that's on the don't side, yeah. So, sure, we use those enrollment studies, we have capacity limitations. If you have repairs or renovations that need to be made, you have your facilities assessment. Need has become a trigger word. How can we express need without saying the word need? You know?
Oh, you
So-
can't say need?
It's just one of those things that's like a red flag to me. So let's say, how can we be cautious with that? How do we then, what's the next part of the sentence? What's our why? Our why is because we have classrooms that are full. We need an additional fifth grade or whatever the case may be. So we'll
So you
have
can say
factual.
But you said need.
You said need. Yeah.
I understand.
So
Right,
you can say
right.
need as long as you
Back
follow
it up with the
why.
factuals, right. And that you don't follow that with, please vote yes.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
That's easy.
So the things, so.
But you can't say it more than twice, because that's repetitive terms.
Yes,
This is
so-
something like, this is why we voted put the levy on the ballot, is because of the enrollment studies showing this, we need,
Yes.
Are you safe?
buildings are requiring repairs, you know.
Right.
That-
So the auditor's office has been very clear that when you put the issue on the ballot, you're going to be deliberating, you're going to be talking about the why, right? And your capacity as board members, and here's your why. But then it's how do you communicate to your community members after that, right? How do you express need without influencing or advocating? Now we're gonna get to your private time in a little bit.
Okay.
So when you
That's
take
fine.
that hat off and you're in the community, even though somebody might say, hey, I recognize you as a board member, you still have a First Amendment right, and you have significant leeway compared to your staff members.
Can you pose if-then statements? We have 35 students per classroom now. If we pass this levy, we will be able to accommodate, we'll have the classroom space to accommodate 25. Studies show the learning environment is needed.
Absolutely, it's fact-based.
Right now, we're talking about stuff that predominantly is gonna come from Lark or the district,
Correct,
right?
correct, from district reports.
Different rules when we're talking about our own private stuff.
Correct. When you, for example, when you adjourn the meeting and you walk out the door, you have different rules because you have First Amendment rights. You technically are not acting as a board member.
Right.
Okay. That is one of the most common things I see. So we review a lot of newsletters, so I've seen a lot of things over the past couple of years, and that is the most common. Using bold, italics, repetitive phrases, and the question is, why are you doing that? Could that be construed as influencing, drawing attention to something in particular, versus just providing the straight, boring facts, right? Now, if there were a levy committee, their newsletter, their brochure, their material could look very different. I would expect it to look very different than district materials. And my favorite that I always use and always come back to is, if your HVAC system needs replaced, should you put a picture of a little girl with a hat and gloves and she looks like she's freezing? No.
Yes.
No. There's a that may very well happen, but the better way to say it is the temperatures in our classroom fluctuate between 60 and 80 degrees, and on days here, 5 out of 7 days it's 60 degrees in the classroom. Right? It's cold. It's factual.
An old rusted out, like, piece of equipment.
Right. All right. So, but levy committees can do a lot of things. They are the ones who are charged with being passionate and persuasive. So that's just something that we should keep in mind. Now, with those communications for the levy committee, there are things that your district can't do either. You can't say, hey, could all the classroom teachers hand out this flyer from the levy committee at the end of the school day? Put them in the backpack so they make sure to get them home. No, because that requires a teacher's time, right? So we want to make sure also that our staff members are knowledgeable so they're not using school email accounts. Let's just say a teacher after hours is using their personal email account, their school email account. Is that as a teacher or is that a community member? Because it's outside of their contractual day. So we don't want to raise any of those red flags. We need to make sure our staff members are tuned into these issues.
Real quick, can a board member serve on the levy committee? Or can a staff member serve on the levy?
There's been an evolution in the answer to that. So the initial answer from the auditor's office was that board members, superintendents, and treasurers cannot serve on a levy committee. They've backed off of that, recognizing that you have more personal time than your treasurer and your superintendent. So I would say, yes, the answer to that is you can. Just make sure you keep the lines very distinct, because the burden is on you to prove what capacity you're acting as.
Right.
So you wouldn't serve on the levy committee and say, I'm here as a board
Board
member.
member, that's right, you can't do that,
You're a
right.
community member
Okay.
at that time. All right. So using school resources, note there's no minimum threshold required for a violation. So the 5 or 10 seconds it takes to send an email on school using school email, you're still using a school resource. I don't know what the value of that is, right? But you're still using a school resource. So when we think about things about building use, for example, this was also, there was an evolution in the answer to this from the auditor as well. Can the levy committee use your building space? Initially they said no, but the answer to that is now yes, as long as they follow your building use procedures, and if there's a fee you typically charge, they need to pay that fee. So sometimes it requires a little bit of education. First of all, the biggest reaction that we've heard is, superintendent, you're leading our school. Why aren't you more passionate about the levy? Right? Why aren't you telling us to pass this? And the answer is, because I'm legally prohibited. It's a criminal offense. But I can share with you any information about our facility needs or our finances in a factual way, right? So it's helpful to sometimes educate our community members and our levy committee to know where those ins and outs are. What can we do? Where is that line? And so, and then in terms of not doing certain things, we don't want to treat any pro-levy or anti-levy committee differently than the other. So what you would do for one, you would do for anyone who wanted that same information.
Including making space available on property.
Correct.
So
And that would be really hard, right? If you had an anti-levy committee who wants to come in and use space. But if you let the pro-levy committee come in, you have to let the anti-levy committee come in. Same with signage. So a lot of districts have indicated, for example, in terms of signage, there is an old Attorney General opinion out there that says you can allow signage on school property, but most boards have a policy that prohibits it.
Generally, we don't charge for community use of it. If it's within the community, generally there's not a charge.
Mhm.
So that would be fine to make the space available for free to either levy committee.
Yes, as long as you just follow your building use procedures and you treat groups equally, right? And then, just making sure in terms of using the employee's office, that would probably not be the best place because it can be construed that employee is advocating or supportive of one particular group. In terms of mail, we had a lot of discussion about mail and postage and that kind of thing for the levy committee. It technically can be used and reimbursed, but the bulk rate, if you allow somebody to use your bulk rate, it's actually a federal offense, so we would not want to do that.
Nicole, in regards to emails, if a community member emails one of us regarding levy stuff, we just say, we can give you factual and we can give you XYZ, but we can't,
Yeah, you have to be extremely careful, and when you're receiving a school email, it is a school resource, and you can always say to them, please use my personal email for these issues, or in my capacity as a board member, we voted to put the issue on the ballot, providing them factual information.
Right.
So it's up to you, and the auditor has made clear the burden is on you to make sure you have proof of where that where you were on that line.
So
That
this
makes
gets
sense.
into the weeds, but if they email our public school email
Yes.
and we respond via that, email me at my other email, we're technically using a school resource to answer a question about a levy.
But you're not advocating yet, you're just
Okay.
telling them to use your
So you
personal
can do
email.
that.
Yes.
How about, when the time is right, Mark and I can work on a universal response for all of you, for all of us, when we need to respond, with maybe some factual things and how to, contact us or reach out to us with more questions.
Yeah, if you'd like anything beyond what I've provided here, contact me this way.
Okay. All right, so our next hot topic is when may school employees and elected officials engage in pro-levy activity? Because you still do have a First Amendment right. These two, I don't know when they don't do school district business, but if they are able, because the burden is on them, to establish that they are not wearing their school district hat, they also have the right to express their First Amendment opinions. For other staff, it becomes a little bit more difficult. Let's take a high school principal, for example. If a high school principal is here during the school day, it's obvious that they're the principal. If they're at a football game watching their own kid, are they a principal or are they a parent and community member? It's hard to tell because if a fight breaks out at your football game, they automatically would flip over to principal. So since the burden is on that individual, we just want them to be extremely careful and knowledgeable about these limitations. Okay, so the levy committee is going to do all the heavy lifting. If anybody wants to, let's say you have a teacher who wants to do a literature drop after school. I've kind of seen this happen, right? Just don't plan the literature drop using school email, school time, planning it.
Don't have them drop them off the materials
Don't-
during school hours. during lunch.
Preferably not having the materials at school. If they have them in their trunk, different scenario. But we want to make sure they're outside of their contractual day, right? And we're not directing that, we're not encouraging it, we're not discouraging it. You're letting them do their thing, understanding that the burden is on them. But other times, when you are wearing that hat, and understanding it's always okay to provide factual information. I've received the question just recently of, when can I provide factual information? Always. You can always provide factual information. It's the advocacy that we are limited in. All right, I do want to talk about hot topic number 4 because this is my speculation of why the Bellbrook situation got to the point that it did. The auditor's office made brought a lot of significant attention to a PR contract, public relations contract, and their survey research firm. Okay, the other group that you want to be cautious with are architects. So in making promises, because you need to understand that there's an incentive to build a building. They are allowed to make contributions to your levy committee if they want to on their own choice. But their role under their contract with you is not advocacy either. So if they advocate under your contract, that would indirectly benefit the levy committee. Okay?
Say that again.
If they advocate operating under your contract, they are indirectly benefiting the levy committee, which is a violation of the law.
Because they're a PR firm at that point.
Correct. They can help you with communications in your newsletters that are factual, right? But if they are advocating, if the auditor state takes issue with your newsletter, that's viewed as advocacy, which means they've done work under the PR contract with your district.
So, but what about strategizing? What about that? Let's just say they're working with us, we're strategizing on, or maybe strategizing with community.
So
I mean, a PR firm does strategy, right?
they can do strategy and how to communicate your vision, your mission for the school district. They can work with you on your newsletters, but the newsletters have to be factual. That's the key. They could also potentially work for your levy committee. But they either need to be donating their time to the levy committee, or the levy committee's paying them. We need to make sure those lines are clear if they're working for both, that you are not paying them to advocate. Okay?
Can the levy committee contract with a school employee? Like, for example, could they contract with Tyler on a separate contract to provide PR services for the committee?
That would be a really blurry line.
Of course.
But, and keeping in mind that the burden is on the employee.
So as long as Tyler could separate his time out.
I
Correct.
took my hat off, took my kids with me.
I mean, I was just curious. I
Right,
mean,
the burden would be to prove that he's not using district time or district resources.
Okay.
Okay. So the other area that the auditor took issue with were the survey research firm. So we're accustomed to surveys. What do you like, building A or building B, right? You're allowed to ask about that, building A and B. What you're not allowed to ask about is, do you want a 9 mil levy or a 12 mil levy? Or do you want an income tax versus a property tax? You can't gauge your voters.
Could you gauge building A is $25 million and building B is $35 million?
Yes.
Which would you prefer?
I was nervous about that initially until the draft became final. So in the final,
25 million, this many mills, option A, you could do that.
yes. In the final guidance, the survey, they provided sample survey questions. Being a bit risk averse, you might just adopt exactly what they stated, right? Everything is, if they put their stamp of approval on it. So what they indicated is, as an example, building A, building B, overall cost would cost taxpayers X amount. It's factual.
But shouldn't we have that decided before we go out to vote? I mean,
No, pre-bond.
yeah, but that's our planning time, right?
Your facility planning time.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So what we often see is facilities, in the facilities planning process, you will get to a point that you have buildings A, B, and C, right? And then you'll know the cost of it, buildings A, B,
Right,
and C.
right.
And you can ask,
But we won't
It
take
could
three
also
buildings
be
to
a
the
way to
community.
groom the community to accept certain, like, so you could, you could put a really crappy building on there and say, this, no
I guess
levy
I
or-
would see a survey happening before the campaign.
Yeah.
Well, no, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you just do it today or in 2 years. If you're using district resources to do it, it still qualifies as campaigning, right?
So if we
the
survey
time, the
community-
timing can come into play. It could come into play, but at any point in time, there's some risk associated with that, yes.
Remember
Ask
with
your
our.
question.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I guess I struggle a little bit in that a survey before we take anything out to vote, if it's not really part of the campaign, I mean, we might wanna survey the community on something we're doing before we even put our campaign together.
Remember, we're gonna go through that ed visioning, and we might come to the table with 25 different options or
Right.
plans. And that community and teacher group and different committees are gonna start narrowing down to where we might have our top 3 or 4 options. Then what would we do with it? At that time,
Well,
we would
then,
survey?
basically, it would kick to my committee, try and put a price tag to all this.
And each option will have what it would
Yeah.
cost the voters.
Yeah, and then you can craft a survey that way, as long as we're not, I don't know.
As
As
long
long
as
as
you're
we're
not,
following the guidelines.
as long as you're not gauging voters, and I'll give you an example.
I thought you said you could do that.
You cannot gauge your voters in terms of whether they will support a levy or bond
Oh, right.
related to that. You can tell them what the cost would be. I know it's kind of a strange way to
Yeah.
approach it, but what they have approved
You
is
can't say A, B, C, or none. It would just be A, B, or C. Pick one of these 3.
essentially. And here's the cost. And we're not going to gauge them on, if we have different ways to structure, because you do a bond and levy, right? There are different ways you can do that, to not gauge them on which would they support. But when it comes to a facility with a price tag and a cost, you can survey according to the auditor on that basis. Okay. So I think those are, the last is your master planning agreement. We used to call this pre-bond. We've gotten rid of the bond. These are facilities planning proposals, requests. One of the things we want to be careful of is that we are not considering an architect because they will make a contribution to a levy committee. So architects have in the past, even in the past year, have indicated, we would love your work and here's all the levies or bond issues that we helped pass. That's irrelevant for your consideration. We had a school district in Northwest Ohio that had to re-bid their design services as a result. So we want to be extremely careful with promises that are made and making sure as a board we're not considering those types of promises.
When you say that, how is it shown that they took that into consideration?
Because a board member said at a public board meeting that they wanted to support a specific architect because they would support the passage of their issue.
Okay, well, don't say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At a public
Pretty
meeting.
clear.
At a board.
So those are just some pitfalls that we've, seen folks get into along the way. All right, so you want to make sure your vendors are tuned into these issues and the limitations, right? So they don't lead you down a path unwittingly. This is not a self-serving statement. I do review lots of newsletters. I review lots of slide decks. And it's really just because there's so much caution being exercised around this right now until people have the mindset. Dr. Miller is a passionate person, passionate about kids and education, right? It is really hard to strip that, and I'm not saying this in an offensive way. I hope you don't take it that way. It's really hard to strip passion out of a superintendent, right? You want to say we need it, here's why we want it, and they're excited about it. So that's what we often work on with school districts is what's factual and what kind of blurs toward the middle line. Having those separate engagements with vendors, making sure they understand their responsibilities, and then reporting costs and tax burdens factually. And this is where, Mark, I would anticipate working with the auditor closely, verifying those costs. Sometimes auditors can be extremely helpful. Also, sometimes auditors will put a calculator on their own website or provide you a calculator for costs. And then just simply the things I think I mentioned here, not surveying to gauge support, not sending newsletters only to registered voters. That has been raised in conversation as something not to do. And then not...
What about a phone bank?
By whom?
So what about a phone bank by the levy committee to Friends of Alder?
A levy
Or
committee,
potential
a levy
yes
committee can do what they want.
Okay.
They have full range of tools. You do not.
Okay.
But they can't get the phone numbers from the school.
They just can't.
Correct, unless it's a matter of public record, and so what you can do is respond to public records requests for information. So if you happen to have a directory that is a public record, they can make that request, and you're legally obligated to respond. So I think that is it in a nutshell. I do have some information about PACs. High level political action committee, it is a levy committee. They need a treasurer that's not the school's treasurer. They would open a bank account, they would get an EIN number, a federal ID number, and they have certain reporting obligations, both locally and at the state level. So, any
Nicole?
questions?
Yeah, I mean, how often has the superintendent gotten in trouble? I mean, this has been around 10 years, you say?
Criminally charged once.
It was one time.
Criminally charged. There have been about 5 findings for recovery. I will tell you, because I'm in pretty regular contact with the auditor's office, they receive a fair amount of complaints. Now that schools have been kind of learning about this, The number of school complaints is decreasing, but they're still receiving them, and the number of other political subdivisions, complaints about them are increasing because it's like schools aren't doing this anymore, so why is the fire department?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's shifting.
Can I ask a question about the criminal prosecution of the superintendent? Do you know the facts of that and what actually happened in that case?
I do. So it's superintendent and 4 board members. 1 board member, because of ill health, was dismissed. The charges were dismissed against her. So we had a board member and the superintendent who ended up pleading guilty to 1 charge, 1 misdemeanor, and then the other 2 went through trial and appeal, and they, ironically or not ironically, were convicted of 1 criminal charge, 1 misdemeanor. There were 4 elements: the newsletter content, the newsletter distribution and the cost associated with that, the PR contract, and the survey research firm that they utilized. There was misuse of public funds and dereliction of duty.
So this wasn't a slip up, this was basically willful.
I don't know the details of those. I know what was alleged, that for criminal charges, there has to be intent.
Yeah, they were actually former clients of mine, right before I became a treasurer. So I know that at least for the PR firm, it was definitely a problem where they had a school district contract and they were definitely advocating for a levy. So that was pretty clear cut. The newsletter is pretty wishy-washy in my opinion, but I don't know, it's a little rough there. But they also had a very active and vocal anti-levy campaign, and community member who's very vocal. So when we did the Formus audit, he was hitting me with public records requests throughout the whole process and calling our office, asking for information. And then using what he got from our public records requests for their anti-levy campaign, like just taking stuff out of context and put it on their flyers and mailers and everything else. So that's kind of how that started, because they had a very vocal anti-campaign going on, where a lot of school districts don't have that really. So
That's interesting, because if somebody's putting false information out there, that's more pressure on us to get actual, I mean, there's already pressure on us, but I think that the line for advocacy gets blurred a little more if there's an anti-levy campaign and we're still.
Because you're trying to get ahead of it.
Yeah.
yeah.
All right.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Well, you scared the crap out of me. I'm done.
And I would say,
It's gone a long way from, I'll tell you what, it's gone a long way from my early days on the board. I mean, board members, we knew who the yes voters were, we would call them. I'm
You
serious.
still could, in your free time.
That's true, but I mean, yeah, that's true.
and the auditor stated they're definitely putting this in their current audits, because the audit we're going through now, they did ask specifically, am I aware of any illegal use for campaign?
Oh, and you're like, oh.
And if it tells you anything, their summary for the year, the number 1 story was the criminal prosecution related to levies.
So are Adam boards and are they getting charged too? I mean,
So-
there have been criminal charges against some of the Adam boards or the
So Adam
DD boards?
Adam
or-
boards are unique. Somebody lobbied really, really well for them. They have a little carve out that they can actually advocate for their levies. They're the one exception besides the chartered municipalities that I'm aware of.
Okay. Wow.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. You guys have anything else?
Are you staying, is she staying for executive session?
No.
Well, thanks for coming.
Thank you, Nicole, appreciate it. Moving on to board governance.
One thing that I wanted to bring up was with Mrs. Walker in the president role in the communication chain. I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. I thought we could have a discussion. Nicole, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, your daily schedule is different than Bill's and everyone else's. And it was easy just to call Bill any single time something came up when there were, hey, how are you?
You can do that.
What?
You can still do that.
Okay. So in the event of emergencies and like time is the concern, I would have Bill or Sonia please let the others know that this has happened and I'm working through it. I need some time to get the details, but I didn't have 5 minutes times 5 to take. I needed to take action right away. So if it's urgent, I'll call you right away. If I don't get you, I'll call Bill and then go right down the chain. If it's not urgent, then I'll just, take the day to make sure I connect with each of you so that we can talk through it. But I just wanted to see if you had a different preference or different ideas. What I don't want is anyone to feel like they're out of the loop on anything. We
So,
had-
in those situations where there might be something, like an emergency happening, are you three okay with either Bill or I calling you to report what Jim told to us?
I mean, that's been the process.
Yeah, okay. Good.
And then obviously, once we have things wrapped up, I can make rounds to everyone and fill everyone in. But there was something that happened a week or two ago, and I realized that Erica was the only board member I didn't talk to on something. I felt like I didn't want you to feel out of the loop, so sometimes that.
But it was a current situation, it was just a new development, and it was fine.
Okay. Well, if anyone ever feels out of the loop or they have more questions, I want you to call me.
And usually if I have a question, I feel pretty comfortable calling you anyway.
Okay.
So,
And I think you guys know how I work by now. The weekly updates are all the positive things coming out from each of the buildings. You can call me on any of those things or call Carla.
Phone calls are the bad ones.
Do you want to rent a record or not?
Exactly.
Anything that you need to, that you're gonna hear in the community or in the neighborhood, I'm gonna let you know same day, hopefully same hour. And sometimes Carla and I might hear something that we just have to do a little bit more digging and asking questions ourselves before we alarm anyone, just send something out that, something may be brewing, but we need to do a little bit more digging first so that we can, I guess, accurately inform you.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then you requested the work session about this membership. I thought we could have a conversation about it.
The OSBA. So if everybody checked their emails, what the thought initially was, I didn't fully understand why we were paying for an OSBA membership. Like, what were we getting for the amount, the cost of the membership? And we've gone around to a few things, and the latest email, do I have that? Yeah. I mean, it looks like at this time, what we know, for me, it was a money concern. I don't want to spend district money unless we have to, or it's, there's a reason to do it. So this looks like, based on the workers' comp refunds, that we're at minimum making back the OSBA membership money, and maximum making some money by nature of being a member of the OSBA in reimbursement through the workers' comp program. So we initially had said, hold off joining the OSBA, but if anybody wants to discuss where we are now and what their opinions are, based on this is what we know. This doesn't mean that we have to be a lifetime member of the OSBA, but maybe for this year we renew again, revisit at next renewal.
they also provide insurance for us. So like up to $100,000, if any of us get injured on the way to a board meeting or at a board meeting or on the way home, they have their insurance covers all board members, including us.
It would be nice to see an
It's on their
actual
website.
breakdown of everything that they provide.
It's on their website.
Right.
It's in there. I think if you log into OSBA with your own personal portal, it shows all of the benefits that are available to you in the district.
And then, some of the things that would be nice to follow up on. I know we had talked about board docs, you get a discount if you are a member of OSBA. I think what Eric and I had discussed potentially is just checking on a few of those things. Like, it's easy to say you're getting this discount. Well, what if we didn't have OSBA? How much would board docs cost? So just kind of running through those things, which we can do, but at this point in time, does anybody have any issues
Yeah,
with?
I want to say something too real quick, just so you all are aware. I mean, I've been asked by OSBA to serve on their cabinet, on their board cabinet committee. This is just recently, I got invited at the end of the year. I haven't started yet, but they're looking for other board members to help advise their current board, I guess. So I haven't been to a meeting, I don't know, but just in full transparency, I think I kind of like the idea, just so we can have some influence.
Some say, right. I don't. I think if we're
think I
gonna be a
should.
member, it'd be great to have you on that board. But I haven't heard anything to date that would say to me we shouldn't be a member at this point.
I'd like to be a member.
I was interested to know what we get out of it, what we're spending on it, and are we getting
Our money's worth.
something our money's worth? But I'm very new to the board and I don't have the expertise in even knowing what some of these things are that we're getting back. So
Right.
I just appreciate that we're looking at it to make sure that it's a value.
Right. And that's and we can continue to do that.
Expertise and opinion on it, because you're more familiar with it than I am, but I'm glad
Well.
we're looking at every dollar we're spending.
Right.
I didn't know we got a refund back from being a member of OSBA. I had no idea on the workers' comp.
Well, just-
They helped us with, they were instrumental in helping us get Jim. They were helpful.
But we did pay for that.
We didn't for Mark. We got it
Yeah.
for free.
We
Well,
didn't do Mark with them.
I used them a little
Yeah.
bit. I mean, we talked about because I think I was the chair at the time, so we were looking for treasurer. I called our consultant that worked with us with Jim and asked about treasurer hiring and some of those things, and they were
Yeah.
really helpful.
Well, I think there are tangibles and there are intangibles.
Sure.
And what I would like to do is over the next year is figure out the tangibles. And then it still may be that the intangibles outweigh, but at least we have an idea of what we're getting out of the.
That was kind of where I
That
was
was it.
coming from too. Like, I see these numbers and I see that it looks like this is great and we're getting this benefit, but I felt like there wasn't enough time to do it justice to I wanna see the full picture without OSBA. What does it look like to every dollar? If we didn't have OSBA, what are we spending and what are we putting in? If we do, then what does everything look like and balance out? And so I think it's just a matter of
Putting in the legwork.
yeah, just
Yeah.
calling board docs and being like, hey, what are your different plans? What are the costs? What are the features? I
And
just
we-
felt like
we
I didn't
may-
want it to be something that was just always done. You just check it off, you approve it.
Yeah.
Does anybody ask the questions? Well, what are the different options for board docs? What are the different options for this, that, or the other? And just find out, where's the money going? Does it have to go in that way to that place?
Are
Just
there
so
other,
that someone's
are there other
asking.
organizations that do something, offers similar services to?
Yeah, these are all great questions. And Erica and I had discussed about taking time over the year to sort of look into the details of it. And it may be that next year at renewal time, we're in the same place and we say, no, it's a great deal, right? But at least, when we're elected to the board, we're supposed to be making sure that all of the dollars are spent wisely.
I agree with that. The thing I would say also as a board, this is our professional organization. And as a board, it's helpful to have a professional organization behind you. There's some 600 districts out there. There's a lot of things we can learn from them. And I think that not having a professional organization behind you puts us probably a little more at risk.
Yeah.
Just because we can learn things from other boards, we can learn things from OSBA, and so,
Yeah.
and being a professional organization, just like BASA, I think there's a treasurer professional organization, I think those things have value.
Well, I honestly think at the end, next year, this time, if we go through everything and the tangibles are still beneficial to our district, and the intangibles clearly outweigh them, which is being in a professional organization with other schools, then it won't even be an issue. It's only if we go, wait a minute, what the OSBA is telling us is a savings is not even
Yeah.
close to being accurate. And then, at that point in time, we can discuss whether or not the intangibles outweigh the tangibles. Does that make sense?
For me, I felt like I wanna know that this is good for us. I don't want to do it because they're telling us it's good for us.
Yeah. That's 100%.
You know,
Right.
like, I just wanna know for sure.
Right.
Right,
I
so
wanna
if
see
you're,
it for myself.
and thank you, Erica, for being willing to look into it more,
Yeah.
and I'll help you where I can. But as of now, I think, does anybody have concerns as of it, we stand right now today to paying the membership to OSBA for the next year?
No, I think we take a good hard look at it over the next year and determine whether the value is there, whether there's an alternative organization. I agree with Steve, it's good to have a professional organization behind you who can apprise you of things going on in other districts. I don't honestly know if there's another.
I'm not aware, there could be, I really don't, I don't know, because
Right.
we've always used OSBA, I mean, the OSBA has been, we've got their conference every year, we get the conference, you know, the capital conference is put on by OSBA that we go to every year.
Yeah,
I'm opposed.
all right, then, I think the proper way to be to put it on the next agenda and then have a vote on it.
Yeah.
Okay, but it was good to have a conversation with everybody, so everybody kinda knows, it's just sort of like, we just.
Well,
it's
and
just
we
an
learned a
information.
lot over the last several weeks on how they
A lot.
benefit us.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I just want to keep in mind too, and again, I'm all for, look at that, we need to make sure that we're spending our dollars wisely, I completely agree. I think the thing to keep in mind that as a board though, you know, we spend $24 million as a board, and I think on the total district, and I think what the district spent on the board is, what they pay us $1,000, so that's about a little over, so that's about 6,000. This is, how much is this?
6,000, some change.
So it's really, we pay $12,000 out of the $24 million budget for the board. It's not a huge sum of money, just, that's my only point.
Yeah. It's a good point, thank you. Okay,
There was one thing of Mr. Hooley, you know, this is just general board conversations. He attended a commissioners meeting this morning. Do you want to give us a high-level overview?
Yeah, so I interacted with Myron Mast, who was at our last meeting, Darby Township.
Yeah.
And I wanted to follow up with him. I also spoke with Diana Rigby, who's a board member in Dublin, to verify what he told us about Shaughnessy Real Estate Group building apartments in Jerome Village or somewhere in their district.
It's over there on Highland Croy.
Yeah, and whether the Dublin district did indeed get not made whole, shall we say, by the developer. She confirmed that. She said they are now responsible for educating in total 500 students from 3 different apartment complexes, 2 of which I believe are located in Franklin County and were greenlit by the Columbus City Council, one of which is on Highland Croy, and I'm not sure who okayed that. It would seem to me to not be Columbus City Council or Franklin County Commissioners, but I don't know who blessed that. She said that's true. They are not getting, and I don't know the exact number, but it's over $1 million in tax revenue that they're not getting a penny of. And that from those 3 apartment complexes, they are responsible for educating over 500 students. They budget $15,000 per student, so that's $7.5 million a year. Dublin is responsible for coming up with to educate those students. So, in talking with Mr. Mast, my question to him was whether he had gained clarity on, it seemed to me when he appeared before us, he was uncertain what kind of authority the Darby Township trustees had in okaying or not okaying various development projects in the district. He's still unclear on that. So I went to the Madison County Commissioners meeting this morning to see if I could get an answer to that. And I introduced myself. I'm just gonna tell you this so that if you hear differently, you'll know that that's not how I introduced myself. I introduced myself as Bruce Hooley, a resident of Darby Township in Madison County. I said I am a newly elected board member in the Jonathan Alder district, but I am not here to speak on behalf of the district or even as a board member. I'm here to gather information that I will share with the board and that I will share with people in the district, but I'm just here to educate myself and to pass along what I find out. So my question, I had several questions for them concerning this first phase of the development that Mr. Mass talked about, which is the 500 unit-ish apartment complex. I asked them, where does that stand in terms of its final approval? They said that it was a long way from final approval. Mr. Mass was of the opinion that the zoning in that, for that parcel, has been completed and would not need to be changed for the apartment to be approved. The commissioners told me that is not true. That there needs to be a change in the zoning, and that any time that zoning change would be coming up for vote at a commissioners meeting, it would be on their website in advance, and we could, residents could, anyone interested could monitor that and weigh in.
The only issue is if the proposed zoning change falls within the master plan, it's going to be.
It's like automatic.
And if you try to stop it, which Durham Township tried to do over there off Industrial Parkway, you end up getting sued by the person that bought the land on the assumption that they were gonna be able to change it. And so by court order, it was either by court order by
Injunction?
either an injunction or they might have agreed to it. I can't remember if they agreed to it under threat of a judgment going against them. Durham Township ended up changing it because it was within the master plan. And by what Myron said, the current master plan, or whatever it's called, for the community, it already has that zone, or has it in the plan to be able to change, to be able to be whatever that they want it to be.
So they mentioned something about that, and I'm not up to speed on all this like you guys are. Particularly you two guys have shown you're very up to speed on it. But he did reference that. He didn't say as clearly as you just did that it'll be tough to get it stopped. But I said, are residents or district voters' opinions taken into account on whether this kind of stuff is stopped or approved? And he said, yes, very much so. So my next question was, okay, if there are people in the district who want to express a concern or want to get information about this, what's the next meeting they should attend? And he said it's the February 22nd Darby Township Town Hall at Pleasant Valley Fire District. Mr. Mass told me they will be sending cards telling everyone about that to those who live outside the village of Plain City in Darby Township.
But if you're I'm in Darby Township, but I live in the village.
So you will not get a card.
But I get to
him.
vote.
But you
in
get to
Darby
vote.
Township,
I don't
which is-
understand.
That's weird.
I don't understand why,
That is
that's just what
weird.
he said.
Is it because the village residency?
Well,
gets
then
the
you
township
probably
then?
can advocate for it.
Both Mr. Mast and the commissioners told me that there will be a representative of the Schottenstein Real Estate Group there at that town hall that night.
Oh, it'll be fun to just bring
February
popcorn.
22nd.
Uh-oh.
February
Little
22nd.
Grigsby.
Pleasant Valley.
Pleasant Valley, it'll be at the Pleasant Valley Fire District building because they assume they're gonna need more space than they have in the Darby
Town hall.
Township
What time?
House. I don't have a time on that.
Oh, just February 22nd.
So the question or the statement came up today as I was talking to them about Well, let me share with you what the Dublin board member told me about the reception that their superintendent received at Columbus City Council. And her word was that the Columbus City Council was, this is an exact quote, disdainful of Dublin's objection to this, to these two complexes for sure, being approved by Columbus City Council. And the justification for their dismissing of the Dublin concerns was that Dublin doesn't have enough affordable housing. And I just said to the commissioners, I said, affordable housing I understand, but I said, you guys are sitting in a position where what you approve has to be, I hope you care what's affordable for our district, what's affordable for our school system. Because I said, if we get hit with the kind of numbers that Dublin's getting hit with, and we're responsible for coming up on our own with that kind of financing, like that would be a real problem.
The only way Columbus City Council could do that would be as if that part of Dublin School District is in the city of Columbus.
One of them is on
Yeah.
Beth, if
It
you
has
know
to
where
be
the old
in-
health club used to be on
Yeah.
Bethel Road, right there, or on
Yeah.
Hayden Run,
Yep.
that's one of them.
Okay, okay.
So it's like that thing where you're
It's
Columbus
City.
taxes, but Upper Arlington schools,
Yeah.
like there's a little
The school district,
pocket
yeah.
in there.
Yeah.
There are certain pockets, and if you can get the land and the developer can,
That's right.
What was that called, the win-win agreement? That was back in,
That's right.
that's back during the win-win.
Win-win,
Yeah.
yep.
one of them, the other complex is on Sawmill Road near the Walmart, which is just north of Sawmill and 270, and I don't know what that.
I bet that's also City of Columbus.
That is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
North of 270 is City of Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have
They
some
must have
fingers.
Fingers. They
do.
got fingers.
Yeah.
Well, they
Yeah.
wanted a finger, they could have had a finger all the way to Plain City.
Really?
If we approved the water and sewer. But remember when we were debating whether it's Columbus, Marysville, or Dublin that
Yeah.
provided us water?
Yeah.
Well, Columbus gave us the best bid, but they had to have a finger all the way out here, and that's why we voted no. I mean, we liked their bid, it was a good bid.
Yeah.
But, we didn't want,
This was a village making a call, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
So, Chris Wallace is a Madison County Commissioner, and he said he'll be in attendance at this, February 22nd meeting.
I think
of
he's a
the County Council.
graduate of Alder too.
So, the commissioners did say that their overriding concern is that the schools be made whole with development in Madison County. Whether it's through a TIF or whatever, but they did say that that is, their guiding principle, so that's good. to
Well,
hear.
and just for some clarity on the Dublin thing, from my understanding. So if I remember right, and one of you may be able to correct me on this, but on that Highland Croy development, the Dublin School District approved the abatement or the TIF. And so they
the
approved
commissioners told me
it.
today that it couldn't have been a 100% abatement unless the Dublin Board of Education approved it. I'm trying to get Diana to confirm that. It might have happened before she got on the board. She's only
Yeah,
been on the
well,
board 2
that's
years.
the only way, yeah, and this would have happened a decade ago.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, but they did it, my understanding was they did it on the assumption that it was gonna bring 46 students or
Right, because
something.
it was
something-
marketed towards
some-
retirement.
Yeah, some very small number of students, and then it just blew up.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the concern that we have about some of the stuff going on in Jerome that are allegedly, they keep saying, oh, they're targeted for
Retirement.
seniors.
Well, she said they're marketed, she has I think it's called Jerome Grand or whatever the complex is, that it's marketed as a retirement community.
Mhm.
But one of the benefits of supposedly living
Jonathan
there
Alder
is
schools.
Dublin schools.
Dublin schools,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I said, well, I probably would, I'm 63, I'd probably qualify to live there, and I have 2 high school students,
Yeah.
so.
Did you happen to see in the Dispatch yesterday, they had an article about the Pulte homes, the Webb homes coming into
I didn't see
Jerome
it.
Township, and said that the Jonathan Alder School Board approved it in December. It did, it said, It was great. I know we didn't, but it said it in the article. It was
Where was
weird.
the article?
It was in yesterday's, I think it was yesterday's dispatch.
Well, then just one more point on that.
Yeah.
With the most, all this stuff that just happened last summer, Schottenstein ended up revising the TIF with Dublin, and so now Dublin is being made whole on that TIF. But it's not a retroactive thing, but in exchange, there was some wheeling and dealing, I forget exactly what it was, but in exchange for something else, they approved, for Dublin's approval on something else, they ended up not recouping, but going
From this point
forward,
yeah.
they're gonna be made whole on that development.
Yeah, I'm a very uninformed on all this, so any help
It's
I
rather
can
complex.
get, any insight you can offer me or whatever, but I just wanna make sure that anything that's approved that will impact our district is done with a board having to vote facing the community members it'll impact, rather than just happening in an empty room.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to decipher, because depending on who you talk to, you get two wildly different answers.
Yeah.
And you're like, those cannot, they both cannot
Coexist.
possibly be true.
Right.
It's literally impossible.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, then it's like, well, it'll have to be settled in a court at some point.
Well, I'm pretty certain the ultimate authority rests with Madison County Commissioners, but I don't know, and Mr. Mass doesn't know how much authority, if any, the Darby Township trustees have.
Yeah, it's one of those things where depending on the deal, potentially Madison County would be the ultimate authority, because they're the taxing authority on that project, that they're gonna offer a CRA or a TIF, but potentially, on the flip side, Darby Township could also be driving a ship on a development and cutting the county out of the decision-making process. But in this situation, it just happens to be that Schottenstein is dealing directly with the county instead of dealing with the township.
Thank you, Mr. Hood.
Yeah.
And there's an email that I forwarded you from David Kell. And I know this is just initial conversations, but he said all the only discussions that are taking place about how the schools will be taken care of are non-school TIFs. It's still very early on,
Yeah.
but.
And our
Put
approval is
that in writing.
required for anything 75% or 10 years, so.
Yeah. That doesn't mean they still won't come to us for an abatement.
Sure.
Right.
But-
Anything else from the board before we break for executive session?
Okay. Can we get a motion to break for executive session? To consider the employment, discipline, compensation of a public employee, and to consider the purchase of property for public purposes.
No, that's not what it says.
Second.
Motion, I didn't hear.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, there you go.
I heard him. You might hear him.
Okay,
So moved, I'll second.
okay, got it. Mrs. Detweiler,
Yes.
Mr. Hooley,
Yes.
Mr. McCartney,
Yes.
Mr. Votak.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.